Hi everyone, we are with Danny Tenaglia, yes, the one and only. Thank you, Danny, for accepting the interview. It's an honor.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you.
We would like shortly to talk about yourself as a young boy listening to music. What kind of music did you listen back then?
Well, when I was a very young boy, I would listen to pretty much what the families were listening to. I had come from a very big family, and it was a mixture of everything. So you had the type of music where the uncles and aunts would listen to Frank Sinatra, Barbra Streisand, love songs of that genre. But then I would also adapt to a percussive type music and Latin type rhythms like bossa novas and Sergio Mendes and salsa that relatives of mine used to love the rhythms and dancing. Joe Bataan, the Fania Music All-Stars. And I learned a lot about percussion and rhythms from listening to bossa nova and all of that. I'm like a sponge. I listen to it all, I absorb it, I digest it, and I'm a mess.
Okay. So what was the first time you saw a DJ, playing in a club or anywhere else and touched you in a certain way?
Yeah, this is a very important story that I've told many times. I was about 11 years old, maybe going on 12, and a cousin of mine was playing a mixed 8-track tape. And because I already loved music so much, I understood. I heard the mixing, and I said to him, Frankie, how do they do that? He explained to me that it comes from a nightclub where there's no more the band, there's a DJ who plays with 2 turntables. And I was so excited. And on the 8-track tape, there was a number, and I called it. And the guy was like, who is this? I said, oh, my name is Danny. I'm at my cousin. He's playing a tape. He's like, how old are you? I said, I'm 12. And he asked me where we were. And we were just a few blocks away from him. So he came over. Yeah. He brought us more tapes, and that was it. I studied them. And from there, I guess in my mind, I've been a DJ since I was 12 years old.
So it's a long story, playing music.
Almost 50 years.
And when did you decide to try to make music?
Well, I was DJing again since my young teenage years. And then about 1985, I moved to Miami, Florida. I stayed there for 5 years. But in 1988, I went into a studio to attempt to make my first song. And surprisingly, it got signed to Atlantic Records.
Yeah.
So that was a start for me, got me a lot of attention, and it also started getting me a lot of phone calls to do remixes. So I moved back to New York in 1990 to pursue the remixing career. So I started remixing, and then making more of my own songs.
Okay.
And then the rest is history.
I'm going to ask you the back to the past question. You take the DeLorean, from Back to the Future, you take the DeLorean and you can go anywhere, anytime in the past. Where and when would it be?
Well, I guess the place that really was the spiritual experience for me and many others that I know, it's the Paradise Garage. Because I went to so many clubs before that, but when I went there, it was a whole different ball game. It was no liquor, late night after hours, one DJ, amazing sound system like you never heard before, and I didn't want to leave. And I became a magnet. And I went every week for many years. I became a member. I became a friend of Larry Levan.
Oh.
Didn't get to know him too well, but we knew each other. We spoke sometimes. And I learned so much from him and from that club. So I can name many clubs, many DJs, but that's the main one where I want to take the DeLorean and park and throw away the keys.
Okay, so you could stay there. And, apart from electronic music, what kind of music are you listening to?
I'm still a big fan of the Beatles, Pink Floyd, Cream, Led Zeppelin, British bands, and just classic rock from the 60s and 70s. I don't like heavy metal, but that's what I would listen to. Or on the other side, which I learned so much of my gift of music was learned through Motown and Philly.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm very, very soulful roots, and that's what inspired me to be a DJ. But as of right now, I've been listening to a lot of Beatles lately. I just have a new Beatles station on FM radio, Sirius XM, and surprisingly, I hear so much Beatles music that I never heard before. So I've been enjoying that.
Okay. What is the Danny Tenaglia's secret guilty pleasure, musically, of course?
Yeah.
Something you listen to, but you are not very proud of, and you don't want to say it that loud.
No, maybe I mentioned it already. I don't travel too much, outside of what I mentioned, the rock and the Motown and the Philly. And then there's so much work, there's so much time I put into my work, listening to house music, techno, tribal, classics, and working it into my sets with track, the acapellas and loops, and it's very time consuming. So I don't really have much of a guilty pleasure.
Okay. What is the era you enjoyed the most according to your long DJ's life, so to speak?
I think it's the era that is pre-disco. Disco kind of exploded in 1977 with Studio 54 opened, Paradise Garage opened in 77. But a little bit before that was when you would hear music that you could dance to, but it was 45s and album cuts. And then the word disco came. So I would say the birth of disco, especially labels like Salsoul, Vincent Montana, Lolita Holloway, and The First Choice, and just one after the other, Double Exposure, and I can name so many, but I couldn't get enough of it. Okay. I loved it so much, and that would be the era.
The late 70s.
I would say 75 to 79 were the most important years that made the biggest difference for the future.
How did you lived the late 80s era with the arriving of acid house, new beat, house music and so on? This particular era, because it was special.
Yeah. Well, that particular era, I was still living in Miami. I moved from New York to Miami in 1985 for 5 years. And I remember 1988 was the first time I left the country as a tourist. I went to London.
Oh.
And everything was acid house.
Oh, I was in London in 88 too for the
Really?
first time, and I remember the Smiley, the acid house
Exactly.
everywhere.
And I was absorbing it, like I said, like the sponge that I am. And there was a guy called Gerald, Electro 101, and Inner City, and
808 State.
808 State, and Humanoid, and Microdot, and Hacienda type stuff.
Yeah. Manchester.
Yeah. I was totally influenced by it. I brought a lot of that music back with me to America, to my residency in Miami. Some people loved it, some people hated it. But eventually, I won them over because I knew how to introduce it, because now house music was becoming a name where people would see it on Depeche Mode, Erasure, New Order, Madonna, Whitney Houston. People were doing house mixes. So I was able to take those house mixes, play those vocals, but then play Jack Your Body or Work It to the Bone and get it in there.
Yeah.
So it was, you had to be crafty.
Yes.
So, but it worked for me. It worked for me. I won them over, and I gained a name for myself while living in Miami, even though I was already a DJ from New York prior. But people didn't know me until after the late 80s.
Yes.
And then when I moved back to New York in 90, then the rest is history.
About Electro, I mean Electro, the real Electro, you talked about Miami, but we can talk about Detroit, whatever. What is your position or what is your taste about Electro? The term doesn't mean nothing today because it has been changed throughout the time. But, Miami bass, Detroit, Cybotron, and, the Detroit stuff.
I gotta say, I've never fell in love with it or became a big fan of it. I saw it as a fun type of genre that was good for breakdancing, and creative dancing, robot, whatever you call it. But to me, it always stemmed from Planet Rock. No, sorry. Numbers by Kraftwerk.
Oh, Numbers, yes.
Which Planet Rock became the melody. They took it. After that, it was that typical beat, but it always for me was Numbers by Kraftwerk, which I was a big fan of since 1975, Trans-Europe Express. To me, it was just a little bit too gimmicky. I never fell in love with it as a DJ. I was always more soulful and housey and deeper soulful, garage, New Jersey, Tony Humphries, that type of soulful stuff. I think a lot of us DJs weren't really too much into electro. Programming of synthesizers and drums, and I think a lot of it lacked the element of musicianship. Where I came from with pianos and strings and Rhodes and organs, vocals. So electro was just not in the forefront for me.
What would be your dream to collaborate with an artist, even if it's not possible today, but just
Oh no!
you know?
You know, I would have to say Prince.
Okay.
I think Prince is probably the pinnacle of all artists. He reflected Jimi Hendrix, Sly Stone, Eric Clapton, Michael Jackson. You know, he had everything going. He was a brilliant lyricist, brilliant dancer, and
Can play a lot of instruments as
yes,
well.
exactly. Nobody could do what he did on the level that he did. The brilliance of his lyrics, how he could perform just sitting at an acoustic piano, or he could play with the best of them like a lead guitar. You know, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you know, with George Harrison's song. He proved himself over and over and over again. So I think Prince would be him or Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder.
Okay, let's do
Okay,
this.
that's it.
Okay. Danny, what do you dislike in the electronic scene? Is there something with your experience that you notice it is kind of negative?
I think probably the overuse of gimmicks to like fake crescendos. So many DJs depend on the snare roll, the effects, to just give that crowd that throw your hands in the air, now boom, we're gonna drop it to the kick drum. It's so manufactured and formulated, and I'm guilty of having to play a lot of that stuff too, but I don't depend on it.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that some DJs of today, if they're new, they feel like that's what they have to do in order to get the crowd's attention. So I think that they're learning from the wrong perspective. I think they need to learn about music first.
Okay, yeah, I have to let you go. Danny, it was an honor to have you.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
Have a good time in France.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.